Test. Oh yeah, looks like I'm good. Okay. I'm Phil Wyman, and this is the Wild Theology Podcast, where the world, the humans in it, and God are all wilder than we've been told.
That's your intro.
So, you'll get philosophy and theology and crazy stories that come from 30 years of pastoring,
Boring.
20 years of festival work,
Whatever.
and the mud and blood of wrestling with the living in the spaces angels fear to tread.
Ooh, trying to sound interesting, are we?
Oh.
Yeah, you think you got something to say?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem, dimwit.
Look, I'm a lot smarter than you think.
Yeah, you tied your shoes this morning.
Whatever. We're Phil Wyman, and this is Wild Theology, where you get to argue with your own ideas.
And lose.
That's the point. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Phil Wyman. So, hello, this is the Wild Theology Podcast, and it's episode 34. I'm going to be rambling a little bit today because I want to talk about what comes up over the next 3.5 months when I'll be traveling through the UK, which will make these episodes a little bit different than they've been in the past. So typically, you'll find here Wild Theology Podcast that I talk about things that I'm writing that are typically theological topics. Occasionally it meanders into philosophy or related topics of anthropology, sociology, and or psychology and history that might relate to whatever theological thing I'm talking about. And then I do some interviews, and typically those interviews have been done with people who are categorized as the nuns and duns, those people who were once part of Christian churches, typically evangelical or Pentecostal Christian churches, and for some reason or another they've dropped out. That's a growing category of people. So that's typically what you've found on this podcast, but I'm going to meander a little bit, talk about what's coming up next, because a lot of what I do has to do with my travels, which are continuous. Home base is Salem, Massachusetts, but I'm only there about 3 months, not even 3 months, 2.5 months out of the year for the month-long Halloween when we have a big outreach, and to poke my nose in periodically to make sure everything's okay and to prove that I have a place that is a physical address that I'm sometimes at. So anyway, I just got finished with a number of months of traveling in the West, from California through Arizona, New Mexico, and spent quite a bit of time in Texas, most of it in Austin, or just north of Houston at a regional burn, and some time in Dallas, and with my friends in the Browns in Brownwood, Texas. But now I'm headed to the UK in a week, and I will be spending my time in Wales, England, some time in Cornwall, and a bit of a jaunt to the Czech Republic, which is something I've been doing for the last couple of years, this particular 3-month trip. This will be the longest one, a little more than 3 months, 3.5 months, and I'll be working in festivals. When I say working in festivals, sometimes it sounds to people like I go to play, but I'm not a very good festival goer. I'm not the kind of person who would buy a ticket to go to a festival and hang out and listen to music or do whatever festival doers do in their particular festivals. I like to create, and I like to work with teams of people who are ministering out of the love of Christ to the community around them. And so in one festival, I may be with a team of people who are cooking food. In another festival, I may be with a team of people who are interpreting dreams. In another festival, I may organize an art project. In some of the festivals, I'm just getting to know the ethos of the festival to see how I might interact with it better. So over the next 3 months, I will be at a festival called Focus Wales, which is actually a showcase of Welsh music, and this will be my first time to be there, and I volunteered to help whoever I can help, so I'll be helping the stage manager of one of the venues at Focus Wales, and that'll be fun to be a part of it. So I'm really happy to be kind of invited in by Andy and Neil and the people who run that festival. And then I'll be right immediately after that, I'll go to Hay on Wye in mid Wales along the English border for the Philosophy Festival, How the Light Gets In. And this will be my 4th or 5th year at How the Light Gets In. I think it's the 4th year. And I'll be working as a steward, but kind of getting a feel for that world of theologians and philosophers and musicians and writers of various kinds, and I've enjoyed. This is one of my favorite festivals because it's a place where I get to debate nerdy stuff with nerdy people, which is always a great fun thing to do. And immediately after that, I'll walk across town. Right on the other side of the town is the Hay Festival, which is a large literary festival. And I've been working with the BBC tent as a volunteer steward there for the last 2 years. So this will be my 3rd year there. And I'm there because this is where writers show up. And so it's me dipping my toes into the world of writers and thinkers at this very influential literary festival. Pappy and his gang from North Carolina are going to be at Burning Nest, which is a regional Burning Man event that happens in Devon, southern England. And I'll probably have to pop in and say hi to Pappy and Michael and Jake, who I know will be there. And then I'm planning on being at the Appleby Horse Fair, which is the largest travelers festival in all of Europe. So this is Roma, and sometimes they call themselves gypsies, but not very often, and other travelers from Wales, Ireland, England, and they buy and sell horses and a number of other goods that are made by the travelers. And it's a rather anarchic, self-organized event that's been going on for a long time. Some people say it's been around one way or another for centuries. So Appleby Horse Fair is in the beginning of June. I'm looking forward to that because this will be a glimpse into a subculture that I've had only brief experiences with, and I'm kind of excited about that. And then in middle of June, toward the end of June, around solstice time, is the Three Wishes Fairy Festival, and I'll be helping Diana. Diana, my friend, I call her Diana the Goth Vicar from Glastonbury, who's in charge of running the Fairy Festival tent. I'm looking forward to that. This will be the 2nd year, but really the first full year of Diana being in charge of it completely. So I'm excited to be a part of that. This is really a unique opportunity, and she just does a great job with this kind of stuff. And of course, I'll spend some more time in the tip of Cornwall and in the town of Glastonbury, and I'll be at Mezi Prostor in Prague and return to be a part of things like I'll visit the Big Cheese in Caerphilly and of course the Welsh National Eisteddfod, which is in Llanrwst this year. So anyway, those are the things that are going on. And when people ask me why I am involved in these festivals, it's because that's where people are. We live in a culture that has oftentimes stopped going to church because they have not found meaning in it, or because they've believed the report that's given by much of agnostic, atheist, secular society that church is out of touch with the world, which I don't believe is true. Some church, yes. All churches, absolutely not. But we have this divide that's occurring just like the rest of society in our politics and many of our social justice issues. So social issues is becoming polarized into competing positions. That's happening with religion versus secular society. So it's kind of an all or nothing thing. And so in many cases, there's a rising number of people who believe that religion is somehow out of touch with our world and is detrimental to it. There's still enough good religion going on out there that that's far from the case. But in the festivals is where you find many of the people who are looking for ritual or liturgy, life of some kind, and have rejected the traditional forms of spirituality. They're running to festivals, and they return to these same festivals every year, to places like How the Light Gets In, to the Hay Literary Festival, to places like the Glastonbury Festival, which I hadn't mentioned, but is also one of those, the 250,000 in attendance Glastonbury Music Festival. I'll be there as well. People are running to these places because that's where they find meaning. Sometimes it's just a release from the drudgery of workaday life and how they feel beat down by it, so they go out and party and let everything out. But other people are really looking for something deeper and are finding it in many of these transformative festivals. And so it's been my feeling for quite some time that the church ought to be on the front edge of that kind of stuff, that we ought to be thinkers in the transformative world. We ought to be people with ideas that are ahead of where society is at. That's the idea of the prophetic. The prophetic ought to be ahead of where our culture is, foresee things that are coming, and give both a combination of blessing and or warning to it. But it seems that the church has been in this place, much like the rest of society, but by the time we think we see something that we consider to be prophetic, we've only responded to that which is popular. It's not on a cutting edge that sees things coming in the future and responds to it before it comes, prepares for it. Rather, we seem to be on the back foot at all times. Well, in the festival world, places like Burning Man, places like Glastonbury or How the Light Gets In, these are places where there are thinkers who are taking our society into the places that it will go. Because we haven't been there, we haven't had foresight. We haven't asked questions about what's coming. And consequently, we've only been responsive. And whenever we're responsive in a critical way, we're probably already on the back foot. Something becomes popular, we respond to it and critique it, and we've already lost. Doesn't mean that things should not be critiqued, but we should have seen many things coming. And consequently, we also don't realize why people got to the places that they got, because we haven't been spending time in the places in the world where people are making decisions for tomorrow. We're spending time hidden away, and we're living in yesterday. So for me, it's important that we're there in the hot thought spots, we might call it, the hot thought spots where people are thinking for the future. And the church should be one of those things, thinking for the future as well. We have a tendency instead to be critical in such a way that when we see something we disagree with everything about it. And we make some assumptions about the things that we disagree with. We perceive them in the light of their worst examples. And what I mean by that is this: when we disagree with somebody's position, we find somebody who believes as they do, find the worst example and use that as an illustration of everything wrong with their position. That's no different than Dawkins or Sam Harris taking the worst Christians and using them as an example of why Christianity must be wrong. When we do that, we fall into a position that I call obscene hermeneutics. It's not the hermeneutics of skepticism that we automatically question and wonder if this is true. Rather, we assume the worst about somebody. We assume an obscenity, that they're perverse in some way, that they're extreme in some way, that oftentimes is not true. And as long as we live in the hermeneutics of obscenity, a radical progression of that hermeneutics of suspicion, we will live in a polarized world where the other person is always evil and we are always evil to the other person. It's time for us to break that, but that means we have to live in the places where these subcultures are developing, where people are thinking new thoughts, and where the future is being determined. For me, that's a big part of this festival life, that we need to be in the places that are the radically changing places in our world, and when we are there, we'll see the future and be able to speak to it a little more clearly, and perhaps even become the kind of church that sees a future coming and prepares for it, and maybe does things ahead of the world, become thought leaders. If we could do that, we'd be a long way into seeing Christianity revived to the kind of place that many of us want to see it revived to. A place of, no, prominence isn't the word I'm looking for. We should always be, as it were, subculture prophets, because Christianity is at its best when it is a surprise. It's at its best when it's provocative and loving simultaneously. And unfortunately, we only seem to do one of those two things. We either provoke, and we do it in a very kind of aggressive, often mean way, or we love and we do it in a non-critical way that doesn't have correction where correction should live. But we want to live in both of those worlds, where mercy and truth kiss each other. That's where the church has its greatest power. And so we are simultaneously, I think, both provocative and loving, and that's where we should live. And so anyway, my next 3.5 months in the UK is to live in those places where Christianity can be both loving and provocative, and in the place where the world is going when they've rejected the church as a means of finding some kind of meaning in life. So this is UK Mission 2019 through the summer, from May 14th until the end of August, and the upcoming episodes of Wild Theology Podcast will have interviews from people there, perhaps be talking with some of the subculture groups and thinkers in the UK, both Christians and non-Christians. I'll be looking into that and then be talking to you later. 1 week to go, and I fly off and head to Wales. God bless. Thank you to my patrons who help make these missional travels and these podcasts possible. Without you, I couldn't do it. God bless you. If you'd like to support this project, you can do so here on Patreon for as little as $1 a release, and at the most, that's $4 a month.
Why on earth would anybody want to support us?
Well, I think we're pretty cool, and maybe some people believe in what we're doing.
Oh, come on, you believe that?
Yeah.
Don't you ever think you're just a little too weird for the average person?
Yeah, sometimes.